Morning everybody. Today marks the start of a 2-week unit of English work where we're building up to writing a diary entry from Michael's point of view. So you're going to end up writing in role as Michael from the book Skellig. So first things first, I'd like you to read chapter 21 of Skellig. You can pause this clip and when you've read it, press play again. Next, as we would if we were normally sticking things in our books, we have a handwriting starter for you, so you can see the word faithfully there. Please make sure your writing is cursive and that your F is tall and it descends as well under the line, and your L's need to be nice and tall as well. So write faithfully a good few times, maybe do 2 lines of it across your page, and then we'll continue with the lesson. So first part of the writing task then, obviously we're building up to writing a diary entry, and so we're going to look at what a good one looks like. So you should have open in front of you the example of a diary entry. It's actually an extract written by a World War II evacuee, so a child around Michael, who would be around Michael's age at the time, and it details her feelings during a very important 2 days of her life. In terms of the features of a diary entry, what we're really looking for is that somebody's writing in the first person, because it's you writing it, so it's the first person pronouns, I, me, my and we. It has an informal tone because when somebody writes a diary, they don't intend anybody else to read it, so really you're writing it for yourself. So it has this informal tone, which is in contrast to the formal tone we've been using to write our letters for the last 2 weeks. Diaries are always written in the past tense because they're very often done at the end of a day and certainly always after an event has happened. Diaries talk about feelings, emotions and opinions, and they go into detail describing the places where these events happen. So have a little read through those diary extracts from Eliza and see if you can spot those 5 features in there. The second part of the task today, so after you've looked for those features, is to continue writing what would be Eliza's next extract. So I want you to write from her point of view. You can see the tone that she writes in from the first 2 extracts on that waggle that you've got in front of you, and you're going to basically follow on from her last one. It's set in the morning where she boards the train, and you're going to use your imagination to really describe what she goes through in the rest of the day and how she might feel. Try and include the features that we've used, so make sure you're writing in the first person. So you are Eliza now, so you're saying I did this, I did that, I felt this. Talk about emotions and opinions, what an emotional day it would have been for her, and make sure everything is structured in the past tense. When you're writing about this as Eliza, it will be at the end of her day, and it will, obviously all of these events will have already happened. I'd expect that to be at least half a page long. So this is our Tuesday lesson of English. First thing I'd like you to do is to read chapter 22 of Skellig. When you've done that, make a start on the handwriting. You can see that the word for today is join. Make sure your J descends below your line, please. A lot of you allow it to float on top of the line and it looks too much like a capital letter. So make sure the J descends below the line just like it does in the example on our page. Pause it for now, and then when you've done that, press play again. So in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at how to use semicolons in your writing. We briefly looked at semicolons in year 5, but just as a reminder, there are quite a few different ways you can use a semicolon, and we're only looking at one of them today. A semicolon looks like the image in the top right hand corner of your screen. It's like almost looks like a comma on your line with a full stop floating above it, and you can see it there in the text that we've got on the page as well. We're going to actually use a semicolon today in an Alan Peet sentence type. It's called a some others sentence. Some of you may have used it last year in year 5, like I say, but for those of you who didn't, here's a reminder. So these sentences you're about to see are compound sentences that use a semicolon rather than a coordinating conjunction to join them together, such as and, but, or so. So the semicolon replaces where you would say and, it replaces where you would say but, it replaces where you would normally say so, and we can only do that if they are both compound sentences. So the first example we have here is some people love new places, and you can see the semicolon there. Others just can't stand them, and I feel the same. The next example, some days are full of enjoyment, semicolons in use again. Others begin and end terribly, and that was the case for me today. So you can see there, if you imagine when you're saying that sentence, instead of the semicolon being there, you'll probably be able to insert and or but or so or some other coordinating conjunction, but we're going to use the semicolon instead to really show that off in our writing. We're going to try and use these sentence types today in a diary extract. So let's have a little look at your writing task. So recap the features from the diary entry that we learned yesterday. So it's that first person pronouns, an informal tone, writing about emotions and feelings and opinions and so on. If you need more of a reminder, flick back to yesterday's slide and they're there for you. Today, I want you to write a diary entry based on something that you did over the summer. It can be a really exciting event or just an ordinary day. It doesn't matter. It's totally up to you. It's not really a big deal the day you choose to write about. It's how you structure your writing today that we're going to be looking at. As well as including the features of a diary entry today, I want you to make sure you include at least one sentence that uses a semicolon. So like I say, I've got some examples there on the page. You can adapt those to suit you. And yeah, get them in your writing, and hopefully today you will end up with, again, another sort of half page of work, a diary entry from your own point of view, using one of these some other sentences in there to show me that you understand how one way that you can use a semicolon. Good morning. We're going to start Wednesday's lesson off by reading another chapter of Skellig. Today it is chapter 23. When you've done that, you can see that the handwriting starter today is the word light. Please make sure that your L, H and T are nice and tall and that your G descends below the line. While you do that, pause this video, and as soon as you're ready, press play again. So today we are taking another step in building up to writing a diary entry. On Monday, just as a recap, we looked at the features of diary entries. If you need a reminder of that, go back and have a look. Yesterday we looked at using semicolons in our writing as a form of higher level punctuation that we're going to try and get in our work this week. And today we're going to be looking at how to use an informal tone in your writing. Now this is in contrast to our writing a formal letter in the first couple of weeks, where we really spoke about how when you're writing to somebody who you don't know, or you're writing about a very important thing where you want to be taken seriously, there's a certain tone to the way that you write to somebody. You don't use slang, and it's very formal and structured. When we write in an informal tone, it's usually when you're writing a quick message, so it can take the form of a text message or, you know, an informal email. It might be sending a postcard to somebody from on holiday, where you really know them, and it doesn't really matter if you use slang words or colloquialisms to those people, because it's not really for a formal reason that you're writing to them. And diary entries follow that pattern because you're only really writing for yourself. Most people don't want their diary to ever be read by anybody else, so you're really only writing to yourself. So it does take that informal tone, and it really is just when you write down your thought process, your sort of inner monologue it's called, all the thoughts that go through your own mind. You should be able to find on our website an extract of a short formal letter. Now this is a formal letter related to what we looked at for the last couple of weeks. I want you to think about how this person would have written about their day though in a diary. Obviously this person's having to write a formal letter of complaint, but how would their diary look instead? Obviously it would be a lot more informal. They would really show their disappointment at their day obviously not turning out how they planned, and the tone of it would be completely different, as obviously they're only writing to themselves about their own opinions and emotions, and you can elaborate on those. You know, put yourself in that person's shoes and think how you would feel if it had happened to you. So I want you to write and roll as Mrs. Webb. She's the person who wrote the letter, as she writes about the day that she went to view the land that she purchased, how excited she would have been when she started off the day, because clearly she would like to own a piece of this land, and then how that day would have turned to disappointment for her, maybe a bit of sadness as well. If you can use a semicolon when you're writing this, even better. And again, I'd expect at a minimum half a page of writing. Welcome to Thursday's lesson of your writing this week. First things first, as always, we're reading a chapter of Skellig. Today it's chapter 24. When you've done that, have a go at this handwriting starter. It's the word heavy. I'm sure you know I'm going to tell you to make sure that your Y descends below the line and your H is nice and tall. Everything else is cursive and legible. That's really, really important. So pause this clip, and when you've done that, press play again. So again, we're still building up to writing a diary entry, and one of the most crucial things when you're writing a diary is that you write consistently in the first person. Now, that's something that's easier said than done. Very often people will flit from first person to third person, so today that's really what I want you to focus on. Diary entries are always written in first person. This means that it's written by us, about ourselves, our opinions, and the things that happen to us. Now, as a challenge, I've given you a biography extract to look at. Now, biographies are always written in the third person because they're written by somebody else about someone's life. And it's about Tom Daley, who's an Olympic diver, very famous guy, British Olympic diver. Look into him if you want to find out a little bit more about him. This is only an extract. And within this biography extract, it mentions a few important events in his life, but they're all written in the third person. I want you to choose one of the events mentioned and focus on that. Now, obviously, it doesn't go into enough detail for you to literally write a blow-by-blow account of exactly what he's done. So what I'd expect here is for you to be able to use your imagination and elaborate on this. Put yourself again in his shoes, just like you're going to have to do in the next few days when you're writing in role as Michael. So put yourself in his shoes and think about how he would feel in these particular moments. Focus on using personal pronouns, I, me, my, we, and try not to slip into that third person. Make sure you're also using the past tense throughout, because these events have already happened. And again, I'd expect this writing today to be of a similar length to your writing for the last 3 days. Good morning, it's Friday's writing lesson, last one of the week. We're going to start off by reading chapter 25 of Skellig and then doing some handwriting. Today's word is the word far. Again, make sure your F ascends and descends, please, really clearly, and that you join it to your A and your R. When you've done that, press play on the video again. So today's writing task is to plan our diary entries. Now we're going to structure our diary entries in the same way that Eliza structured hers. Do you remember at the beginning of the week we looked at the diary extracts from that World War II evacuee? So we're going to be writing 4 separate diary entries from 4 separate days that Michael has experienced. You've got access to the whole book of Skellig via our website. So we're going to use and refer to certain chapters to help us plan certain days. So we're going to plan, like I say, 4 separate days in role as Michael. So you are Michael, and the 4 entries are going to focus on different things. So the first entry we're going to plan is when Michael first meets Skellig, and you can find that in chapter 3. The second entry is going to be when Michael meets Mina for the first time, and you can find that in chapter 7. The third entry we're going to write in role as Michael is when he goes home and finds, well, he calls him Dr. Death. That's sort of Michael's nickname for him, where he finds Dr. Death looking over his little baby sister at home, and they decided that the baby needs to go back into hospital, and you can find that in chapter 12. And then the final one is where Mina takes Michael to see the owls up in the loft, and you can find that in chapter 13. So they're the 4 different days that we're going to focus on. So my suggestion to you is, as you're planning exactly what Michael would have thought and felt in these on these particular days, go back, read those chapters. They're often only 2 or 3 pages long, so it's not going to take you a long time, but just familiarise yourself with how Michael was feeling. Make sure when you're planning this that you don't sort of jump ahead. Obviously, we've read chapter 25 today, but we're only looking up to chapter 13. So when you're talking about Michael meeting Skellig for the first time, we can only focus on what he knows in chapter 3. We obviously know a lot more about Skellig now, and Michael's met him quite a few more times, but you've got to be very careful when you're writing that you don't talk about things that they'll obviously happen in the future, won't they, for Michael? We're writing in that day where he meets Skellig for the first time, and it's the same with Mina, and it's the same with events that happen with the baby. We know a lot more now than Michael did at the time, so make sure you focus your thinking just on what's happening in those chapters. Include that information in your plan. The planning template is also online, but if you can't print that off, not to worry, just split a page into 4 different sections. That's all you really need, and you're bullet pointing this crucial information that you need. On the next slide is the success criteria, so you'll see again places where, or you'll be able to identify in your plan even places where you can address this success criteria. Obviously you're talking in the first person throughout, but you might want to identify now. I'd love you to use a semicolon now in your writing. Now, you don't need to use a semicolon in every single diary extract that you're going to be writing. Just choose one of them and choose where you're going to put that semicolon when you're writing now. If you can put it in your plan now, it saves you having to think about it later. So that's all we're doing today. You're planning your 4 separate extracts so that next week we can write them out as we come across each one on different days. Welcome to Monday's English lesson. We're going to start today by reading chapter 26 of Skellig. So pause this clip, read that extract, and as soon as you're done, press play again. So today's lesson is our first lesson of building up to writing this quite large selection of diary extracts that we're going to be doing from the point of view of Michael. We're going to be writing the first entry that you planned today, so it's really important you make sure you've got your plan next to you throughout the week and that you refer back to the success criteria, which is actually slide 6, the slide before the one that we're on now. So this is the first time that Michael meets Skellig in the book, so I suggest you reread again chapter 3 to make sure that you've got all of that key information about how Michael felt at certain moments and his opinion on Skellig. I mean, imagine walking into the back garden of a house you've just moved into and finding somebody in your garage. I mean, what a shock that would be. I mean, I think Michael shows a lot of bravery. He doesn't seem to be too scared of him, does he? But think about how you would feel, like what would your opinion be? Like I said on Friday's lesson, we know a lot more about Skellig now than Michael did at the time of this extract. So you've got to make sure that you don't sort of slip into talking about things that really are happening to Michael in the future based on when this diary extract will happen. Include details about the build up to their meeting and how shocked he must have been to find someone in his garage, and ensure you really go into detail on his feelings and opinions at key points. Remember, a key feature of diary entries is also explaining the location that events happen, so talk about the garage in a bit of detail as well. And obviously, it goes without saying, throughout the week you're going to be referring to the success criteria throughout. So today's task is simply to write a diary entry extract 1, which is where Michael finds Skellig. We're going to start today's lesson off by reading chapter 27 of Skellig. So while you do that, pause this clip and obviously as normal press play again as soon as you're ready. So today is our second diary extract. We're going to be focusing on our second extract where Michael meets Mina for the first time. Now, as a reminder, that's chapter 7, so you're going to want to read that again so that you include all the key information about how Michael felt at certain moments and his opinion on Mina, and you're going to want your plan alongside you as well, because hopefully you've gone into detail about that when we planned it all on Friday. Think about how Michael feels about her initially. He seems quite sceptical to me. He's not sure what to make of her. He doesn't know how to feel about her. Be mindful, again, that we know a lot more about Mina now, but Michael doesn't at this particular moment in chapter 7. So this diary entry is really only his opinion at that particular time. Again, refer back to the success criteria, but I would expect this, as with all your diary entries this week, to be at least half a page long. So we're starting today's lesson off by reading chapter 28 of Skellig, and when you've done that, we're going to move on to the writing task. Now our writing task today is writing diary entry number 3, enroll as Michael, and it's chapter 12 where he finds Dr. Death looking at his baby sister. Again, read that chapter to make sure you've got all the key information that you need. You can find it on our website. How's Michael feeling? Can you describe his emotions? Can you include observations on how mum and dad react at the time? Does their reaction worry Michael in any way? Because obviously all of those things are what Michael would be writing about in his diary at the end of each day, sort of when he's sitting up in his room just before he goes to bed. Put yourself in his shoes. Remember, throughout, you need to be writing in the first person. You need to be writing in the past tense and really be using that informal tone throughout. So for Thursday's lesson today, we're going to start by reading chapter 29 of Skellig. And your writing task is to write the final diary extract that we're going to be writing in Roll as Michael, where Mina takes Michael to see those tawny owls for the first time up in sort of the rafters of a house. So reread chapter 13 to make sure that you have all of that key information. Think about Michael's opinion on Mina by this point. Look back at what you wrote about how Michael felt when he met Mina for the first time, and think about how his opinion on Mina may have changed as we've obviously progressed all the way through to chapter 13. He knows her better. He clearly likes spending time with her because, you know, he hangs around with her quite a bit. He trusts her because he let her lead him off to a place where he's unsure of. So how have his thoughts and feelings changed? And he may well write that in his diary, specifically focusing on you know, his feelings towards Mina and whether or not he thinks she's a good friend, etc. Again, first person, informal tone, and talk about the locations they were in. Obviously, Michael found this attic, this loft space, this roof space, quite a creepy place. I think anybody would. So make sure you get a good description of that in as well. And don't forget, if you haven't done already in any of the previous diary extracts, today is the day where you need to get in your semicolon, your sentence using a semicolon. So you can refer back to the some others slide if you need a reminder of what that should look like. Right then, Friday's lesson, thank goodness. Have a start by reading chapter 30 of Skellig, and then we do have some handwriting for you today. It's the word long. Again, make sure your L is nice and tall and that your G descends below the line. It needs to be in cursive and it needs to be very neat and legible. So please have a go at that. As soon as you've done that, we're moving on to our task for today. So our task for today is very simply going back and looking at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday's lessons worth of work. So those 4 diary extracts, and we are proofreading them. We're going to edit and improve all 4 of them. To do that, we're going to use the success criteria that you've got, and you're going to use our normal checklist of checking for spelling errors, checking for punctuation errors, grammatical errors, and we're going to improve your vocabulary. You need to make sure that you've written in the first person the whole way through. You also need to make sure you've got that informal tone, so you may want to try and spot opportunities where you can make your diary extracts a bit more informal maybe than you've written them, because I think we're so used to writing in a formal style now, it may be a bit hard for you to write it with that informal tone. Obviously checking spellings is absolutely essential. And what I would just make sure is that you're doing each one of these one thing at a time. Use our success criteria as well. You should have included a semicolon in your writing at some point this week. Like I say, one semicolon is enough. But if you haven't done that in any of your 4 diary extracts, today in the editing process, you need to find a way of fitting that in. And so as soon as you've edited thoroughly all of those pieces, all of those diary extracts, you're done for today. Have a lovely weekend.